This is Orlando Wilson, and in this video podcast, I'm going to answer a question I've received from a few people. Reference the fallout from the war in Ukraine as far as crime and terrorism is concerned in Europe. This is a little bit of a political topic. It has to be political, and I'm sure this video is going to upset a few people, which such is life. That's all I can say. Now, the big issues with Ukraine are going to start when the funds stop flowing. When NATO realizes they're not going to win as they want to win, there's not going to be some fantastic victory. If anything, there might be a brokered stalemate, and that's going to leave a lot of people upset. It's going to leave a lot of troops, the volunteers, the fighters, now looking for work on both sides. So in wars throughout history, when that happens, you're going to have issues as far as new organized crime groups, etc. New militias, a lot of unemployed soldiers looking for work. And the amount of weapons that's going into Ukraine, there's a large selection of that stuff that's ending up on the black market from both sides. I think they've even found missiles from Ukraine in Latin America. They're in the Middle East, they're everywhere. So again, for people that's saying the weapons are not being distributed, they are, by both sides, illegally. So that's one issue. I've got notes on this because it's a complicated topic. Now, to start off with, people need to understand, and this is what a lot of people don't understand. This is Biden's war. This is the Biden administration's war. This is Hunter Biden's war. This is not, the whole of the US population is not supporting this war. The Republicans, certain Republicans, even though they're standing by their country because they're patriots, they're pushing through bills to try and get the funding stopped, and also accountability. Because at this point, there's no accountability to where the funds are going, how they're being spent, etc., which is ridiculous. If Trump was in power, we wouldn't have this war. Period. It wouldn't have happened because he's a businessman. He didn't like Zelensky anyway. Zelensky was behind his first indictment. Trump sent Rudy Giuliani to Ukraine to look into what Biden was doing in Ukraine, Hunter Biden was doing in Ukraine, and also what Obama was doing in Ukraine. So there's friction between both camps, the Republicans and, well, Trump's camp and Biden's camp, as far as Ukraine's concerned. It's been there from the start. And if Trump was in power, President Trump was in power, we would not have this issue now. Zelensky, for a fact, was put in place in 2014 by the Obama administration, and what's her name? Victoria Nuland. That's a fact. He's a puppet. Zelensky is a puppet of the Biden administration. Not the American people, the Biden administration. So, when the Republicans get into power, be it at the next election, or they push through enough bills to get this funding stopped and accountability, there's going to be issues in Ukraine because the money's not going to be flowing anymore. Now, I'm talking about the US on this rather than Europe. Why? Because I think it's pretty clear after the incident with the Nord Stream pipeline, and I'm sure all of the informed people have seen the Seaman Hurst article, and anybody that was guessing from the beginning would be, why is Russia blowing up its own pipeline? Doesn't make sense. So the fact the US went and done that without telling Germany and other NATO members says the US thinks Europe is just a bunch of bitches and they need to do as they're told. So I think that sums things up. So for this video, this podcast, I need to be talking about, as far as decision making, it's the US that's making the decisions, nobody else. The Biden administration's making the decisions, and UK, Europe are just doing as they're told. That's it. So the issue is going to be, after this war, and even now, there's going to be economic issues. Economies are going to go bad in Europe, in UK, which is going to lead to hardship, which is going to lead to more crime. It's common sense. It always happens. Where you don't have stability, where you don't have good economies, you have more crime. Now, if NATO doesn't win this, again, it's going to look stupid again. And I've said to people, People have pulled me for this, saying, I've said, well, NATO ran away from Afghanistan. The Taliban beat NATO in Afghanistan. And I've had people say it's political, it's this, it's that. What? Okay, too much BS. Now, let's put it in simple terms, because a lot of people need things put in simple terms. If a boxer gets into a ring for a fight and he gets knocked out, you know what? He gets knocked out. It doesn't matter if he had emotional problems, political problems, whatever type of problems. He got knocked out. NATO got knocked out in Afghanistan. It got the taste slapped well and truly out of his mouth by the Taliban. And I've had people say, well, they've done it to Russia. Yeah, they did do it to Russia. The Taliban beat Russia. Taliban beat NATO. So I think in history, the Taliban is going to go down as the elite fighting force of our times because they've beaten the two superpowers, right? Period. And as far as the rest of the world, which includes Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, Asia, they're looking at all these things going on, and it's not looking too good for NATO. Anybody with half a brain that follows military situations, etc., can see that even in Iraq, with the rise of ISIS, the NATO-trained Iraqi army collapsed. It ran away, like NATO did in Afghanistan. What, if we want to say saved, what saved Iraq from ISIS was the Shia militias and Hashishabi. That's a fact. If it was left up to NATO and the NATO-trained Iraqi army, it capitulated, it ran away. So at the moment, NATO is not doing too well. Now, as far as terrorism in Europe is concerned, with the fallout with Ukraine, as I said at the beginning, you're going to have how many trained soldiers that are used to combat, that are used to doing something in their lives and not being unemployed. Once this is finished, they're going to need jobs. Are they going to go back to doing manual labor, doing their regular jobs, or are they going to turn to crime? Well, the thing is, crime is a lot more exciting. Crime is a lot more profitable than working in a supermarket, than working on a building site, than doing manual labor, which is, to be honest with you, most of the troops that's there. Even if they have skills and can do other jobs, are they still going to get the same adrenaline working in an office as they would doing other things? So I think, for matter of fact, once this quietens down, you're going to see a rise in organized crime, new organized crime groups in Europe. And that goes as far as I'm hearing, there's big business already as far as human trafficking is concerned and sex trafficking. Why? Because you have how many displaced people, you have how many displaced children, children without parents, etc. So you're going to see a rise in trafficking. Common sense, those gangs are going to be taken over, going and work for the larger narco trafficking gangs, etc. They're well armed, they're trained, they're going to be problems. Then you'll get the people who are just disgruntled at their governments, etc. You're going to see problems, period. Now, what a lot of people are not thinking at the moment is that, let's talk from a terrorist point of view. Russia at the moment is fighting a very contained war. They're fighting a special military operation, which is in Ukraine. Whereas the Ukrainians have, I forget the girl they killed with a car bomb in Moscow. They hit the bridge going into Crimea. There's been how many poisonings, a lot more car bombs within Donbass, etc. So Ukraine is fighting to some extent a dirty war. At this point, Russia is fighting a conventional war. So let's say now Russia expands its operations. And again, sorry, I'm looking at notes. Russia expands its operations into Europe. Can Europe defend itself against an organized, professional, well-funded and armed terrorist campaign by, say, Russia or one of its affiliates? My answer is definitely not. Can the EU, UK secure its infrastructure? No. And at the moment, this is what everybody's barking about. They're fighting. They want a war with Russia. Europe is not in a state to be able to defend itself at this point. It's infiltrated. Let me put it to you this way. I was reading something on social media recently. and some American was bashing the Brits. And this guy said in, I forget it now, I know 1776 was independence. So before that, the start of the revolution, I don't know the date, the American Revolution. This American said, we started a revolution with you guys. We started a war with you guys because you upped our tea tax. Right? Simple. That started because the Brits upped the tax on tea. And the American said, it's like, we started the war over a tea tax. At the moment, you have illegal immigrants pouring into your country, raping your children, sexually abusing your children, and you're doing nothing about it. And that's true. UK cannot secure its borders. UK has got illegal immigrants pouring across the channel in rubber dinghies. And a lot of them are turning up in UK, grooming children, sexually assaulting children, raping children. Sex crimes are going up big time. And what can UK do to stop that? What is UK doing to stop that? Absolutely nothing. Minimal. So if UK cannot stop its children being raped and sexually assaulted by illegal immigrants, how is it going to stand up in a world war? It's not. It can't. Because the country is that dysfunctional. Now think about it from a terrorist point of view, an organized, say, Russian terrorist point of view. How many of the immigrants in Europe are Russian agents, Hezbollah agents, who are just waiting, sleepers, waiting for the command to act, to start targeting politicians, to start targeting infrastructure? Well, nobody knows because, again, UK as an example, the illegal immigrants turning up are not even vetted out. They're not even checked out. Nobody knows who they are. There's no way of checking who they are. What's the British government doing them? Putting them in 4-star hotels, giving them benefits, etc., etc. How many of those guys could be Russian agents? And the Russians have plenty of friends in countries where they could recruit Muslim and Arab-looking, well, Muslim and let's be, how can I put it here? Illegal immigrant-looking personnel, people. So again, nobody knows Europe doesn't know who's in Europe. So how many of those people could be Russian sleepers? A lot. If these people decide to rise up and cause problems, what can Europe do? Not a lot. I was saying years ago to some Greek friends of mine when there was issues with Turkey, always issues with Turkey, and they were on about defending their borders. I was like, Turkey doesn't have to come across your borders. At that time, Greece was full of illegal immigrants. I said to him, MIT, the Russian intelligence, is very, very sharp. They're very, very professional. I said, how many of these people in these camps, refugee camps, are MIT agents? MIT instigators? Nobody knows, because nobody knows who's in the camps. Turkey wouldn't have to go rolling across the borders with tanks. They could cause chaos in Greece just by uprising in the refugee camps. Same can be done throughout Europe. So again, that's one angle. Europe doesn't know who's in its country. You cannot fight a war, and this makes me laugh. Everybody's barking about going to war with Russia. Okay, the first thing you need to do, you need to be able to have, what you need to have is secure logistics, secure supply routes, etc. Western Europe is not secure. Western Europe is wide open. So all these supposed military experts that's saying NATO, Europe could go to war with Russia, basic rule of war, if your supply route is not secured, if your logistics are not secured, you can't do anything, you're wide open. All these supposed experts, to sum up, are just delusional, absolutely delusional. I hope this is a little, that's just one point, which I hope you see that war with Russia for NATO and Western Europe is not really an option. You're wide open. As I said, UK as an example, you can't protect your children from illegal immigrants. So how can you protect military logistical routes, logistical supplies from an organized and professional terrorist campaign? You can't. You're dreaming. Now, let's jump on to another way of doing things, unconventional war. It's a fact. China is at war with America, right? And a lot of people will say it's not, but it is, economically, etc. One of the main weapons being used is fentanyl, drugs. Drugs is pouring into the US from China. Nobody's doing anything about it. The borders are open, etc. Fentanyl is coming from China. So let's say from a Russian perspective, an unconventional warfare perspective, I think Western Europe is the highest user of illegal drugs, after the US. So just push fentanyl into Europe, push more drugs into Europe. You'll cause more problems. You're drug Europe. You look at places like London, and again, I'm bashing UK. Originally, I'm British, so I'll bash UK. Knife crime is going through the roof in London, in a lot of UK. Big issues with kids stabbing. And let's say, what would happen if those kids had guns? There'd be a lot more crime, a lot more gang fights. It'd be chaos. So why does Russia, again, backtrack, why does Russia or anybody that's looking to target, say, UK or Western Europe, need to send in sleeper agents when all they have to do is pour in more drugs and pour in firearms and make sure they end up in the hands of the gangbangers, the kiddie gangsters? Flood the countries with firearms, drugs, etc., and just let people kill themselves and cause chaos. 100 pistols is nothing. As far as guns are concerned, 100 pistols is nothing. I think at one point in the US, I legally owned 50 guns. Legally owned, had the paperwork, whatever, completely legal. I owned 50 guns. And I know people that own a lot more. So 100 pistols is nothing. But if you put 100 pistols into London with a couple of thousand rounds of ammunition, London would be absolute chaos. Combine that with a few shipments of fentanyl or whatever else people are taking these days, just to mix things up a little bit. I don't think UK would be worried about the war in Ukraine. UK would have enough issues to deal with its own mess. Well, it's a mess anyway. But so hopefully you can see there, the war in Ukraine to me is completely unnecessary. And if President Trump was where he should be, there wouldn't be a war in Ukraine. People would be doing business as normal, and we wouldn't have to be dealing with the BS we're dealing with today. We also, in the near future, wouldn't be dealing with the fallout that's going to come when this BS is finished. So all I can say to finish up is this whole mess is something that Hunter Biden, I'm sure, is very, very proud of. Because this is Hunter Biden's war. This is the Biden's administration's war. And the mess, the complete mess it is, and the mess it's going to be, I think it's something that Hunter Biden would have had difficulties concocting on, so we put it politely, on some of his more colorful or darkest moments when he was tripping on whatever drugs he was taking. So, I hope this video and podcast makes you think about a few things. I hope it's upset a few people, because I hope I've slapped you with a few truths. And I hope it makes people wake up. As far as UK needs to wake up, because it's on the verge, it's on the way to being a failed nation, an unneeded failed nation. And that's something else I need to talk about in another video. But UK is on the way to be a failed nation, and people need to wake up very, very quickly. Once this war is over in Ukraine, the US will be okay. The US has a good economy, motivated people. It has resources. Europe can hustle. UK has no resources and an unmotivated population, to say the least. So, as I said, I hope this podcast makes you think. In the meantime, follow me along on social media for more of my podcast videos, etc. We're going to be touching on more sensitive topics in the near future. And we're also covering the usual topics such as close protection, kidnap and ransom, security issues, etc., etc. So follow us along. And if you've got any comments, any hate mail, please feel free to send it to me. I'm not that sensitive, I'm not that woke, so you're not really going to offend me. So please feel free to vent. In the meantime, be good, stay safe, and stay out of trouble.